Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Books. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Umbrella Academy Season 3, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I love Luther being high on sunshine. The fact of the matter is that he's so happy on top of the world, and he's just walking about the town super happy, goes to buy some stuff along with some condoms, and it's just like, yeah, I'm about to have sex. It's what I do now. And I'm like, oh, poor guy. It's like, well, he did before back in season 1. I don't think he's had any sex like subsequently since, but still. Because I was about to say, I was like, how do you get around the whole his body situation? But I'm like, no, that's already kind of been dealt with. Like I said, I think if I remember correctly, he had kind of like drunk or high sex in season 1, if I remember correctly. So either way, but while that's all happening, immediately a whole bunch of people on the street end up getting zapped by the pulse from that energy. So now it is no longer just creatures, well, not just animals. Now it has moved up to people now. Once again, how does it pick and choose? Once again, maybe there is some reasoning behind why it hasn't taken certain people. Marcus, he was up close and personal, so him getting taken is kind of not too much of a surprise. But everyone else, why they're, once again, that's why I'm like, maybe it's also because they're superpowered. Maybe their superpoweredness prevents them from getting. I keep every episode I'm throwing out more and more theories about why they themselves are just fortunate enough not to be the ones, because I guess maybe their very existence is, once again, it's not of this world, so it's the time-space continuum basically wiping people out. As I said in the first episode, Thanos snapping people doesn't like necessarily work against it because of that, but maybe eventually it will. We'll have to wait and see. I'm curious what the actual explanation is going to be for why that's not affecting them, and why it took so long for it to work its way up to people. Maybe breaking people down on such a level of just like turning them to dust or whatever it's doing to them, killing them on a molecular level, whatever the case may be. Maybe it just needed time to build up the power needed to do that. But even then, it's like, why only some people at a time? Because even Luther says, no, I didn't kill everyone on the street, just like half the people on the street. So, and I love when he shows up, it's like, hey guys, they're like, where have you been? It's like, I was held hostage. You guys not notice? They're like, yeah, no, of course we noticed. And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. He's like, honestly, the sparrows, it was actually pretty good. They think we have Marcus. It's like, well, we don't have Marcus. He's like, well, I was hoping that would resolve one issue. And obviously he gets brought into on the whole grandfather paradox thing, which I love the whole, I guess that was a commissioned, reenactment. Well, not even a reenactment, just kind of a physical. I'm assuming they'd have like some of like the reenactments of everything that, is like, right, every timey-wimey thing related to the commission. But it's like, yeah, don't be an Elmer. It is that, it's like the paradox effect of, oh, he went back in time to kill his grandfather, but he killed his grandfather too soon because his grandfather hadn't had his mother yet, and his mother and his father hadn't gotten together, so he basically made it so his mother didn't exist, and so in turn he didn't exist, but he still went back in time to kill his grandfather, so it's that complicated, weird loop of, it's the complete opposite of the Fry's version of a grandfather paradox, where it's like, oh, cool, you're your own grandfather. Now they're all kind of dealing with that reality. But Klaus is the only one who seems to really care the most about, right, our mothers were murdered. To be fair, they've never really, I guess, because that was something once Klaus had brought that up, I really thought about that. I was like, wow, they've never really talked about, I was like, did they never ever decide to go, do correct me in the comments down below, they've never actually gone to look for their bio parents, have they? It's kind of like, I can understand why. It's like, well, your bio parents sold you. They were like miraculously, like you guys were miraculously concepted, and then all of a sudden, oh wow, your parents like super sold you to some like eccentric billionaire, so it's like understandable why you'd have such issues with them, so I'm not going to fault them too much for probably not wanting anything to do with that. But once again, Klaus is in a situation where he kind of lost so much, as he describes it later on. It's like, oh, he feels like ice cream scoop. He's just constantly getting scooped out, when it comes to love, when it comes to family, and he's just hoping that getting close to his mom could have filled that void a little bit, because it's every time he has love in his life, it goes away. I mean, he no longer has. Once again, I'm blanking on the character's name, but it's the dude he met in Vietnam. And then, like, he doesn't even have the Ben that he's known all these years by his side anymore. Like, there's this other timeline Ben, but that's about it. And so he's trying to find, he wants an answer. So, like, right, aren't any of you curious who murdered our mother? So he sneaks back into the Sparrow Academy. And he's like, I miss this because I love the wetsuit and everything. It's like, right, you are going to be going through, I guess, essentially the sewage tank. The septic tank, sorry. And so makes his way in. And we see Reginald being treated. I guess the rest of the Sparrows treat him this way too, but they keep him medicated. And they're just like, yes, sign these papers, old man. Which I'm like, man, this is such an inverse. I brought it up before. Like, it's so weird that, because his children kind of feared him. I mean, even in 63, he was able to kind of like put them in their place. This isn't the same Reginald. In fact, his kids run him, but I guess it's like, right, they snuck some pills inside of his, like, porridge and stuff like that, mixed some stuff in his tea, and then just over time, like, he just kind of lost the will to keep going, and just, instead of fighting back anymore, they'd already kind of, like, medicated him, and he's like, right, you try to do your best for your children, and then things kind of blow up in your face like this. It's like, well, I guess that just shows you, yeah, your kids, the Umbrellas, yeah, they're assholes, but they're not nearly the assholes the Sparrows are. That, because, yeah, they had these conflicted feelings with you, but there was a love-hate thing. Sparrows seem like they just straight up hate you, so I guess they saw him as weak. Because, like, none of his kids would have ever done what they did, you know? So that's also, like, the interesting rub of it all, you know? So I find that so fascinating. Because also, I would assume that would mean, I mean, I doubt they're medicating him because they know who he is. I'm like, no, they must not know what he, almost when Klaus later on was about to poke his face, I thought Klaus was going to find out, because this Umbrella still have no idea what their father actually is. But he says, like, oblivion in his sleep, because he had said, like, right, he had all these plans, and it kind of all amounted to nothing. And I love that Klaus got, like I said, went about that whole, what was it, Baskin-Robbins, like, metaphor that was just like, you understood where he's coming from, but it also sounded like complete and utter nonsense, because it's Klaus. But he says, like, if I get you ice cream, will you shut up? And he's like, do you want ice cream? Because if I give it to you, will you shut up? He's like, yes, yeah, I do. And he's the one that taught Reginald the pill trick, so that's going to blow up in the Sparrow's face later on when their father kind of goes back to being, Reginald goes back to being a little bit like himself and kind of whips them into place. So, and then also the whole Grace thing of, like, her being in front of, like, what she's considering God, and it's just being, like, speaking in tongues, and you're like, this is weird. Once again, we saw Grace being weird in season 1. This is next level. I guess, at least, like, with her programming and everything being off, I guess this time she has something to latch onto, whereas before she didn't necessarily have that. So that's, once again, I don't know whether that's just happenstance or whether that's done on purpose, but that's such a weird element to the story that she is doing that whole thing of latching onto that power and treating it like God. Even Klaus seeing it firsthand, being like, okay, that's, yeah, that's weird. So there's that element to it. Then at the same time, you have the whole Lila and Five having to work together thing. That's why I was like, Five came to talk to her and she immediately tried to attack him. I was like, really? And you're doing this naked too? I'm like, why are you? I was like, all right, yeah, dummy. It's only 10 days ago that she found out that her father, that her parents were murdered by Five. So it's like, yeah, well, to be fair, it's interesting too, because it's been over a decade for her, but it's like, yeah, if your parents are getting murdered, you don't let that go, you know, i.e. Batman and such. So yeah, you don't let that go. So of course she'd be holding that grudge, because she hasn't seen his face for those 12 years, but just to be in front of him again and just like, oh, your stupid smoke, your stupid face. Especially when she gets on to him later saying, like, right, you murdered my parents, and he's like, fair enough. And then she's also like, right, and your family just stood by as this Swede, that last Swede ended up killing the woman who raised me. It's like, well, for one, that woman's about to kill you. well, no, she actually did kill you until I rolled back time and saved you. You're welcome. And also, because she's treating Diego like crap, she's just kind of like, she's like, oh, all these people I'm banging it out with, like, yeah, here's your child. I moved on from you. And even 5 is like, oh, and if you're stringing my brother along, if you're treating him like that because of what happened back in 63, you're kind of messing up, because that idiot might actually love you. Definitely, the handler never did. You were just a means to an end, you know? You were what she wanted, and she set that whole thing up just to get you, because she knew what you were and how valuable you were. But in the end, I thought was interesting too, because I guess Lila's still under the impression that Diego is like, right, because Diego left the commission, went back to his family, kind of chose his family over her. So this is like, I guess because she still does have feelings for him, but she, you know, because probably, yeah, the way Stan puts it is like, yeah, she slept with a whole bunch of people too. Like, but I'm assuming it's like, right, you're just sleeping through with so many other people, maybe to kind of compensate for your feelings for Diego. Because she's hurt because, like, right, you left me to be with your family. She also believed what the handler said, like, oh, he knew about it. It's like, no, he didn't know about what 5 had done to your parents. He had no idea, but, you know, the handler got that inside of Lila's head. So I think a lot of that's contributing to what her, I mean, one running away, I mean, upon finding out, like, wait, they're kind of your fellow non-biological siblings, so just finding out you had this, like, large family all of a sudden, and yeah, so her and 5 have to reluctantly work together, because they're trying, none of the cases are working, like I figured as much. So the one curious thing was, my thing was, could it be, I figured they weren't going to work, because that's why Lila showed up, because it's like, of course, she came here because she had nowhere else to go, because she can't leave, and, you know, so I'm wondering, is it, like, once again, the paradox of it destroying and unraveling time, space and time itself, so the briefcases don't work? But it seems like it's because, well, when they do eventually time travel, because he pushes, but he can only, not perfectly, but he has a more control over a few minutes. Jumping all the way to the commission wouldn't be possible. So I guess that also implies that it isn't a full-blown out-of-time thing. Once again, maybe season 1 they might have talked about where the commission actually is located, because I think it is located in a very specific point in time, I think. But with Lila's powers of, like, mimicry, she's able to feedback loop the power, and they're able to jump to the commission, but when they do, the place is run down, it's frozen over. So I guess, like, I guess the same person that may have killed their parents made it so the umbrellas never existed. Maybe they wiped out the commission too, somehow, some shape or form. Maybe there's some correlation there, maybe not. It's so, because once again, this family doesn't communicate, because even Luther's like, hey, like, we could all work together. This is one large misunderstanding. Well, 2, it goes further that when the family doesn't always fill each other in, because Lila and 5 were working on had both, because Lila had the loot suitcase. Granted, even if Vanya and Victor and Allison had gotten it, it wouldn't have mattered, because they wouldn't have been able to use it. But if 5 had informed them, they wouldn't have gone off to try and make that deal. And Allison's not in the right headspace to be making deals, because she's super aggressive, to the point Victor's like, you're usually the calm, collected one. It's like, because Diego's usually the hothead of the family. So, well, him and Luther, but mainly Diego. So it's like, right, her being like, yo, we got Marcus. It's like, oh, well, you kidnapped our brother. It's like, yeah, give us the briefcase, or he's going to be returned to you in pieces. Because the whole point was to tell them the truth. And Victor told part of mainly the truth, like, right, we see how Marcus, but the fact of the matter is, that's kind of like a time travel thing happening. There's lobsters, dogs, and animals, but also now people are disappearing too, so. But Allison, it's like, right, she's this close to getting back to the timeline where Clara exists, so that desperation is what's driving her. And Victor's desperate too, because Victor's like, this is an opportunity to get back to Sissy, which I'm like, I wonder, will Victor try to go back to 89 before she dies, or further? Because Sissy did say, like, right, if you find a way back to me, you take it. Because I wasn't sure what Victor's ultimate goal was. But it's like, yeah, of course you're not going to go back to present day because Sissy's not going to be there. And even if she is, well, we know she dies in, like, 89. But there's no guarantee. She probably would have been dead present day, even if because she probably would have been older, you know, just natural causes and such, so. But I also love, one, Luther's making a mixtape and just Diego's just being like, wait, Lionel Richie, come on. He's like, hey, Lionel Richie is cool. He's like, no. I don't know if that's supposed to be implying like, no, are you trying to say like Lionel Richie was never cool? Or is he just being like, no, bro, you need to stop this because you're a lovesick puppy? Which is interesting and hypocritical. And, you know, maybe that hypocrisy is what's driving that. Because Diego's a lovesick puppy because of the whole him and Lila thing. And him thinking he's nailing it as a father. It's like, well, considering the family, I mean, that's also the thing too. Like, neither Lila nor him had the greatest upbringing. I mean, their father was kind of shitty to them, so, but, I don't know, the handler treated Lila better, but, I mean, from what we saw of Lila and the handler's relationship, it's not like it was great. I mean, the training is one thing, because it shows that Reginald and the handler pretty much handle things the same way, but at least the handler pretended to love. I don't know if that's better or worse. Reginald was just kind of cold, handler pretended to be warm. I don't know which one's more effed up. Maybe pretending to be warm. It's like, at least Diego saw his father for who he really was. Lila never did, so that betrayal, like, hit so much harder. So, I mean, to the point, Diego's like, oh yeah, it has to be our dad who murdered our mothers. And it's like, but does he really seem capable of that? Even Victor's like, actually, kind of, sort of. It's like, you can't really put it past her dad. I mean, they don't even know about the secret cabal that he ended up murdering back in 63. To be fair, like, once again, I love, because poor Klaus, I think this is kind of a jacked up thing, but when he helped out Reginald with the whole pill thing, he was like, oh, I did not like you before, but now I'm kind of turning around on you at least a little bit. And Klaus was almost like, hey, that's the closest, I think that's implying that's the closest any of them have ever gotten to any affection from their father. So that's why Klaus, it's almost sad that, like, that's all he gave you and it meant the world to you. So, it's like, yeah, he's capable of it. He just chose, I mean, we saw with Grace, he is capable of love. He just, you know, I think extenuating circumstances made him into the asshole he was. I mean, kind of always was one, because he was already an asshole to them in 63, but when people run up to you like, yo, we're your kids from the future, yada, 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 who knows? Maybe that's a contributing factor enough to be an asshole, but I think it was kind of already there in him. Maybe just him trying not to get too attached, doing what he, but you know, it's like, right, this is my life's goal, this is my work, trying to achieve that. Maybe he thinks like sentimentality isn't necessary, and I guess he tried to rip that out of his kids. But I mean, they ended, at least the Sparrows don't seem like they have that, but the Umbrellas definitely do. Like, yeah, they have their issues, but they are a little more emotional than the Sparrows are. Well, at least some of them. Which, speaking of the Sparrows, they know everything's BS because they find the ball of light and they find out Marcus is dead. So it's like, right, so they're lying to us. But also they're being like, right, you're also the reason why this got here. You guys, I mean, they admit it was a time travel thing, but it's like, right, now Marcus is gone. To be fair, Ben and Faye, because I kept being like, I didn't know if it was like Fee or Faye, like how they were handling it. I should have figured it wasn't Fee because I know how Fee is spelled. It's like F-I-E just because of Trails of Code still, but it's Faye. And I guess I should have realized that it was like, regardless. 2 and 3. Because he's now, Ben's calling himself 1 now, and she's like, wait, what does that make, well, she's like 2, so she's like, what does that make you 1? He's like, yeah, it's a new hierarchy, Marcus is missing, and it's so interesting, because Diego's the only one that was really aiming for that, because none of the other siblings cared about the, like, numbering thing. Diego's the only one who ever did. He always, like, him and Luther always had that back and forth about, being number 1, being the leader and such, so I think that's such an interesting thing that, yeah, despite that, the Sparrows feel that way too. But Ben's like, oh, you and me, we can have complete and utter control of the the sparrows and such. It's like one. I mean, Ben is obviously such a major asshole in this continuity. I think this Ben's assholishness can even put Diego's to shame, essentially, you know? So, but what I thought was interesting is she's like, Faye says, oh, you tried it before. How did that work out for you? Which I'm assuming the scar across his face might have something to do with that story about, like, oh, he tried a gun for number one and maybe Marcus put him in his place type of situation. But speaking of, like, the Luther and Diego thing, because of the whole, like, wait, Luther's just finding out about the Victor thing. It's like, wait, what about, he's like, yo, shouldn't we mark this occasion or something? He's like, you just want to throw a party, don't you? He's like, why do you hate little sandwiches, tiny sandwiches, Diego? And then Victor's there like, hey, it's like, okay, he wants to throw you a stupid party just so you know that you're loved. And you could tell Victor's like, oh, yeah. It's like, do you feel loved? And Victor's like, yeah, I do. Okay, good. Well, you are. There. And walks away. And he's like, oh, nice haircut. I like the haircut. It's like, oh, is it number 11? Yeah. Oh, good. It does a good job framing your face. And walks away. I'm like, oh. Especially that means so much to Victor because obviously there's layers upon layers to it just because it's like, cool, my family accepts me as I am. But it's also like Vanya, well, even as Vanya, Victor always felt outside of the family. And now it's like, oh, now we're, like, the fact is Luther's even being considerate of that, you know, which wouldn't have been the case in the past. It shows how they have grown as a family. And I'm like, I love that. I thought that was really sweet just because, you know, it's a culmination of everything. It isn't just a whole Victor thing. It's a culmination of everything. It's like for the first time, Victor's like, yeah, I'm comfortable in my own skin. My family accepts me. And the fact is Luther's even thinking of like, oh, trying to do something generous, like throw me a party, being like, yeah, we got you. We love you. And I'm like, I thought that was really sweet. But I also love later on, because I love he was like, oh, like, let's commemorate, like, you know, oh, Victor, like, you know, like welcoming him in as a brother. But also it's like Victor and Diego and Luther looking at Allison and Victor and like, oh, look at their relationship. It's like, yeah, look at those two like getting together like a peas and pod. Like they've had their contentious relationship in the past, but they've definitely grown closer, and it makes them a little envious because they don't have that type of relationship. Diego's like, yeah, but every time we try to do something like that, kind of blows up in our face. So. But it's like, no, we're the ones in charge, just because we are 1 and 2. So it's like, why are we following Allison's decisions on this? Essentially, it's kind of, it's like, wait, who put you two in charge? The Sparrows show up, things start escalating. Sloan is trying to tell Luther to run, but before they could. Shit hits the fan and the Sparrows fight back and are ready to wipe them out. But in that moment, the guy shows up, and just like I guess it was Harlan, but he went hard in the paint and he kind of pulled a bit of a Victor and like murdered everyone. Because it's very similar. It's a different color, and maybe that's just Harlan's own spin to it. Once again, maybe the next episode will really dive into it. But the way they look, their eyes and the bodies looked afterwards, it's very much how Vanya left people Victor left when they killed people in the past. You know, so that's interesting. So I think it is maybe some piece of that power was still there, or maybe it awakens something, or maybe the whole implication is that Harlan was one the entire time. No, because it couldn't have been, because the umbrellas and sparrows, like, all that didn't happen until 89, so it's like, it had to be some residuals of the power left, wasn't all taken out last season. So, there has to be some element of that. That's the only way that could be. It has to be that way. But once again, it's like, last season, Harlan displayed at the very end, like, it was some almost telekinetic ability, but maybe there's more to it. Because I figured as much, because he had, like, 6 bags of food. He ate one of them, but I'm assuming it was meant to be for all of them. Because, of course, it would be 6 because he never met Ben. I mean, Ben wasn't even around at the time, and even if Ben was, he never could see Ben, but he saw 6 members of the Umbrella Academy and remembered that, so. But, holy crap. Luckily, Luther was able to save Sloane, but Jamie, it's Alfonso, not just Alphonse, but Alfonso and Jamie bit it super hard. Christopher, Faye, and Ben run for their lives. So now the Sparrow Academy is whittled down to 4, just like the Umbrella Academy was 4 right there. So that's interesting. Sloane's going to probably feel a certain way about, like, cool, 2 of her siblings are dead, so... And that's just going to agitate. Well, Ben and Faye were planning on getting control of the Sparrows. You kind of have it now. Not the way you wanted it, but that kind of super blew up in their faces. I was like, wow, I didn't expect them to get super murdered. So that was interesting developments. I'm very excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.